Welcome back to Sonic Speed Reading. Today we're talking about a very special milestone, Sonic's 900th adventure. Don't get it confused, IDW has not produced 900 issues of this book. It's nothing like that. Even if the legendary Archie series was still around, they'd be far, far away from that landmark. But this is, in a way, possibly the only way Sega would allow celebration of not only the Archie Sonic series, but also Fleetway, as well as IDW themselves, as the publisher has counted up every single English language comic printed starring the Hedgehog, declaring that this one-shot comic is the 900th in this impressive publication history. And while we unfortunately won't be seeing any Freedom Fighters, Robot Squirrels, evil versions of Super Sonic, or convoluted Eggman evolutions, that number is still paying its respects to those series that helped carry the Hedgehog into comic milestones unseen by any other gaming icon out there. But IDW is fudging the numbers a little bit here. That 900 does include reprints. But hey, with or without them, this is still an incredibly impressive number. And for the celebration, they brought along a very impressive list of creators. Bookending the story itself, we have Ian Flynn on writing, pencils and inks by Adam Bryce Thomas, and colors by Valentina Pinto for pages 1 through 6 and pages 37 through 40. For pages 7 through 12, we have Evan Stanley handling writing, pencils, and inks, with Gigi Dutrier on colors. Pages 13 through 18 has Nigel Kitching, yes, Fleetway Sonic's Nigel Kitching, back for writing after over 2 decades of being away from the Hedgehog. Along with his writing, we have pencils by Mauro Fonseca and colors by Reggie Graham. Pages 19 through 24, we have Daniel Barnes on writing, pencils, inks, and colors by Minho Kim, and additional colors by Evan Melee. Pages 25 through 30 feature the writing and pencils of Aaron Hammerstrom, inks by Matt Fries, and colors by Natalie Fordring. And pages 31 through 36 are written by Caleb Goldner, with pencils and inks by Abby Bulmer, with colors by Heather Breckel. Rounding all of that out, we have lettering done by Sean Lee, with editors David Marriott and Riley Farmer. That is quite the collection, and I am very sorry for any name I have butchered. I know I've done it before, and I probably will do it again. And that's not even mentioning the gorgeous covers done by some of these artists, including Evan, Adam, and Natalie, as well as others done by other Sonic legends like Jonathan Gray, Matt Herms, Tracy Yardley, with my favorite of the covers. I'm sorry, they're all great, but the nostalgia is just too strong for me when it comes to this one. But they also brought along Yuji Uekawa himself and Fleetway's Richard Elson. And we will have to talk about that particular cover a little later because this does play into a specific talking point I want to discuss, but more on that again later. At first, I thought this would be a collection of short stories, similar to the annuals we get for this series, but nope, this is one continuous story, one that revolves around the Warp Topaz. First introduced alongside Dr. Starline, who originally discovered the stone. This magic gem played an important role throughout the early arcs of IDW and made its way all throughout the legendary Metal Virus story, where it was last seen used in conjunction with a Chaos Emerald powered Super Sonic and Super Silver. This is the very last loose end from that particular saga, as it went missing after it had launched Sonic into Blaze's Soul Dimension. Even Starline himself had his story end in later issues, so I was curious to see how they'd wrap things up with this swirly rock. Well, let's see how they did. But before we get into it, I'm proud to announce that I'm finally a real YouTuber, because today's video is brought to you in part by Raid Shadow Legends. No, not that Shadow. This game doesn't have hedgehogs with guns, but that's always a possibility because Raid has over 700 champions across 15 factions that you can obtain, level up, and adventure through 12 demanding dungeons or battle in exciting PvP arenas. And if you'd like to jump in yourself, the QR code on the screen or the link in my description will get you a free starter pack to help you get going on your own journey. Thank you again to Raid for sponsoring the video, and let's get back to it. The story kicks off with Sonic and Tails hanging out while the Orange Fox is cataloging just how many times Sonic has saved the world. And the Fox is just casually remembering the Metal Virus like it wasn't one of the most traumatizing stories ever told in this franchise. But yeah, with that included, that totals everything up to 899 adventures. And just then, the Warp Topaz appears right in front of the duo. After a quick analysis, Tails says that the Topaz is still supercharged from the Emeralds. And if all that unstable energy is let loose in the wrong place, that could be a big problem. It could wreck a city, or if it popped into the core of the planet, that could be the end of everything. They decide that their best bet is to return it to the same spot Starline once found it, hoping that this might stabilize the jewel. But as Tails points out, as Super Sonic, this thing knocked the Hedgehog into another dimension and gave him amnesia. There's no telling what this thing can do to him while he's in his normal state if they don't figure out a way to disperse or share that energy in some way. But Sonic says they'll just have to figure it out while he's out there in the world. He'll get to running while he keeps in touch with Tails through his watch communicator. And with that, Sonic is warped to Green Hill Zone. And no, I'm not bothered by its appearance, honestly. I don't think we see it enough in the comics, and it's nice to see some more Sonic-y environments. But I am, however, deeply bothered by the complete lack of rings. Spare me the comments that they're exclusively a game mechanic. That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard, and I don't believe it for a second. It's the single most iconic Sonic element outside of the Hedgehog himself, and I will complain about it every single time because it's especially weird in Green Hill of all places. It's got floating platforms. That's fine. Rings aren't fine? Whatever. Sonic does say something interesting here. He says he's not dealing with any more infections, corruptions, warpings, or any other nonsense. They're going for win 900. Now, obviously, he's already wrong because he's going to be warping everywhere, but that little line is telling us that this story probably takes place after Sonic Frontiers, something a lot of Sonic fans were wondering about. Now, whether or not this one-shot takes place later on in the mainline IDW story between arcs, I have no idea. They might never even mention the adventure from Frontiers outside of a quick reference here or there, but at the very least, I think we can safely assume that this story takes place after that game. Anyway, this is basically how the story carries on. As Sonic warps to a new location to meet up with another member or members of the main cast, that's where the creative teams switch up. While Sonic is still in Green Hill, we get to see other game elements we have yet to see in IDW, including Dragon Road from Unleash and the Orca from Sonic Adventure, who gets a cathartic smack in the face by none other than Amy Rose. And I do love that. It's a quick little whatever, but considering that Sonic Adventure is the game where Amy stepped up from damsel in distress, being chased down in her entire campaign until the end where she turned the tables, and now she's the one that knocks out the iconic Orca, the creature that chased down Sonic himself in the very same game. That's the shot they use in all the marketing leading up to the release of the game. It's one of the most iconic bits of anything throughout the history of Sonic, and Amy's the one that takes it down and then befriends it too. I don't know if it was meant to be that deep, but I did want to mention it. And this is still very in line with Amy. With the chaotic portals, the Orca is stranded and she can't leave the big beastie here, even if it did try to eat her man. So they quickly send it through another portal and land back in Green Hill, where we are also shown how close these two hedgehogs have become, as they end their brief interaction with Amy embracing Sonic, and the blue boy doesn't try to run away like he would have back in Sonic Adventure, but then right after, he zooms off without Amy knowing how to get home, which, yeah, that very much tracks. Right on the edge as always. You'll get your wins someday, Son Amy fans. We then move over to Kitchen's story, and when I first read through this, I didn't really track it as his part of the story, but then again, I'm not as familiar with Fleetway as I am with IDW or Archie. But rereading it again, and seeing just how often Sonic called Tails buddy, yeah, there's a bit more Fleetway Sonic in here than I first realized. Kitchen even gets to play around with Knuckles and Metal Sonic, and while this is no Metallics, I'm sure that warmed the hearts of many Sonic the Comic fans out there. Kitchen's take on these characters are fan favorites, outside of the psychotic killer Super Sonic at any rate. Kitchen doesn't get that many pages to play around with, but having Sonic feign weakness so Metal could take some of the warp energy, only to then trick the bot, sass him, and piss off Knuckles, yeah, this is about as close to Fleetway Sonic as I think we were ever going to get in IDW. It's very cute. Moving on from there, the next creative team gives us an Eggman robot in the style of Mazinger of all things. Suppose it would make sense that Eggman is an old school mecha fan. Also, I'd love to know what this abandoned city is supposed to be. Is this the aftermath of the perfect chaos attack on Station Square? Would make sense to call back to that kaiju fight with an old school Eggman mecha. I don't know, I'm trying to rack my brain. Have we seen Station Square since the end of Sonic Adventure? I suppose this could just be a random generic city, but I'm a sucker for any potential lore. And this portion of the story is full of cute little references. The Chaos Control joke was adorable, and of course the OVA reference did not go unnoticed. Mr. Barnes referenced it in Scrapnik, and it's good to see that the Metal Robotnik fight gets some love here as well. What I did find interesting is that this is the Sonic vs. Eggman battle of the comic, and not once do we see the good doctor himself. I mean, he's here, he's present, but he's in the mech the entire time. We never once see him in the flesh. Just thought that was kind of weird. Also weird, I think this is the most effort Orbot and Cubot have ever given in a fight against Sonic himself. himself who just teases the little bots. I mean, we don't have Antoine anymore, so I appreciated seeing the Hedgehog being a bit of a troll. Might as well be on these two. And hey, it's Sonic the Hedgehog, so we have to have some meta humor, right? As Daniel ends his segment with a big oof. Fantastic. As Sonic moves on and has more time with the Topaz, it's clear he's getting a better handle on its power, and he pops off somewhere else, this time to a location I've never seen before. And I think this is a brand new spot because we have both Sonic and Blaze, who is here with Cream, both mention that this canyon is one neither of them have ever seen before. I don't know if this is teasing a location we will see in the future, or if the creative team was just allowed to be a bit, well, creative. Either way, it's gorgeous. And it's cool seeing the two characters most prominently featured in the Portal games teamed up. I don't think we've had an adventure with Blaze and Cream specifically, but it's a cool team up. And while the canyon is gorgeous, we do get some love for some more obscure Sonic locations, including Tropical Forest from 06, Water Palace from Sonic Rush, and I think this is Megalo Station from the Ryder games. I'm admittedly not as familiar with that trilogy as some others, so someone in the comments is sure to let us know. Go on and flex that trivia knowledge, Sonic Warriors. Oh, also real quick, sorry if my voice sounds different. This is Nick jumping in while I'm editing. I noticed a couple things. First off, I called Tropical Jungle Tropical Forest, my bad. But only now it just hit me that Sonic says he recognizes this place. And if you are familiar with that game, you know it yeeted itself out of its own canon, because spoilers, end of the game with some time travel shenanigans, all of the events of Sonic 06 never technically happened. Yes, I know Silver is a part of the main cast, but they can explain that away with Sonic Rivals 2. But I do have to wonder if this was a subtle little way of nodding to the overall canon of that game. Just a cute little thing here, that's all. Anyway, carry on. I do of course recognize Red Mountain, and it's awesome seeing Blaze interact with the fiery stage hazards like they're nothing. And it's nice to see this story treat Blaze like an action hero, as we know she can be. Not a lot of characters get any time to shine if they're not the Hedgehog himself, and Blaze is certainly underrated. She is a parallel to Sonic, and also probably Knuckles in her own dimension. She manages to soul emeralds all of the time, so it makes sense that she can get a handle on the Topaz just as quickly, if not quicker, than Sonic himself. And the cat aside, it's good to see the bunny as well. Always a fun time with Cream. The next section sees Sonic running into a decommissioned cave. I don't think this is a game reference, but it is filled with birds. The Babylon Rogues listened into Tails' transmissions as he was sending Sonic's friends to different locations to help him siphon off energy, and they were waiting here for Sonic to arrive at this location. He speeds around them, making the rogues look like chumps, and blasts forward into the cave, only to find Rouge and Shadow, who, like all the other friends, were asked by Tails to help Sonic alleviate the massive energy coming off the warped Topaz. Shadow, however, isn't really eager to work together, instead telling Sonic to hand over the Topaz so the Dark Hedgehog could handle things from here. And I don't know if this interaction is going to make Shadow fans mad or not, I don't care at this point. And after Sonic Prime, I certainly don't blame Shadow for being weary about Sonic with erratic magic rocks. Sonic, of course, says screw it and blasts on out of the cave, leaving the rogues behind to be quickly trashed by Shadow. It's a very quick interaction with a lot of characters, but I think this is the first time Jet has ever faced off against Shadow in a straight fight. I mean, that bird is basically useless without his airboards, so I do like that they established some sort of pecking order for Sonic rivals here. This all leads us to our last section, with Sonic still trying to track down the right cave from which Starline first discovered the warped Topaz. Turns out, through the handling of this wonky rock and better understanding it, Sonic has actually been helping it find its way back home this entire time. Considering how this hedgehog handles chaotic energy, this tracks. And I love that the cave in question has swirls and spirals carved into the surrounding rock, clearly showing that this is indeed the cave from which Starline first pulled it out. And that exact spot is clearly marked by the writings of the late Dr. Starline, declaring that greatness began here. After all the trouble the platypus caused with this gem, it was this same stone that not only saved the world after the metal virus, but Starline's ridiculous ego also, ironically enough, helped put the threat to bed once and for all. As Sonic puts it back, it lets off its burst of energy, collapsing the cave around it as Sonic makes his escape. Now, with 900 wins under his belt, he runs off to, I can only assume, to adventure 901. So while we did hit a few Easter eggs, I did skip over a lot of detail here because, well, not only is this comic brand new and really is a milestone, if you're a Sonic fan, I do highly recommend you go and check this out for yourself, if only to own a piece of Hedgehog history. But outside of that, we got some amazing talent on display here. I really am blown away with a lot of the art. We really do have the best talent currently working on Sonic stories. And looking back on this long history, that is something worth celebrating. I love the cute references, I love the lighthearted nature, and it was great seeing all these characters and finally having IDW show off some more of Sonic's gorgeous creative world. It's more than just fields and villages. And on top of that, it really shows off just how well the current comic team gels together. The tone is consistent through every artist and creator. Even Nigel's story felt very in line with everyone else, unless you're actively looking for more subtle things in his style of characterization. It's very clear that everyone here truly loves this world and these characters, and this was a fantastic showcase of their incredible talents. But I still have a couple of issues. But I do need to stress that this boils down to personal preference and expectations. And this critique is not really against the creators themselves, but more about Sega and a bigger, broader issue I've had with them for quite a while. This is a one-shot story, not a collection of stories. And it's amazing how well this flows together while showing off just how good these creators are. I was not kidding. I genuinely think this is the greatest team any Sonic comic has ever had backing it up. This is a beautiful collaboration that celebrates an incredibly important part of the franchise. But I have been here for all 900 of these adventures. I haven't read every single one, at least not yet, but I will. There are still patches of Archie that just bored me to tears that I want to go back and properly look at, and I went most of my life without realizing that Fleetway Sonic existed. But the more I read it, the more I love it. This has been a wild roller coaster in terms of quality throughout the years when it comes to Sonic comics, and a massive chunk of that 900 number is thanks to Archie, and this comic was the place to properly celebrate all of that. I mean, this is the Warp Topaz. It took us to the Soul Dimension when it was juiced up, and it's still juiced up. This would have been a great chance to briefly run us through other interpretations of Sonic and his world, but we don't even get vague hints of that anywhere. No, I did not expect the Freedom Fighters, but couldn't get some grass-roofed huts or something like Mobotropolis for a quick second. Couldn't get anything from Fleetway for a brief moment. They did give us a robot in an Easter egg in a background earlier on in IDW after all. Though I will admit, the more I read of Fleetway, the more I see it in Nigel's story. That workshop that Metal is in, it looks like it jumped straight out of Sonic the comic. Just the layout, the doodads all over the place, and the coloration. So credit where it's due. This comic just reminded me how limited Sonic's world currently is. And again, I'm not placing that on the creators, because I'm sure they would have loved to go even more crazy than what they did here. Sonic interacts with the same handful of characters he always interacts with, and while I'm always happy to see them, I'm also not exactly jumping out of my seat either. We don't get anything new to say about the Warp Topaz, which I absolutely have more questions about after Sonic Frontiers, and again, the lack of rings is just dumb. It's distracting, I'm sorry. But let's be clear, I don't think for a second any of that has to do because of the writers or the artists or the editors. Time and again, every single one of them have showed us they are bursting at the seams to go off on fun ideas for this hedgehog. And Nigel has a long history showing how creative you can get with these concepts. They've all showed us amazing interpretations of these characters. I know a lot of you are sick of me playing Simpmonk for Sally, but I am never asking for anything that's outside of Sega's control. They own these characters. If there's any confusion in the rights with specific designs or stories when it comes to Archie or Fleetway, I promise you, they can sort it out. They just don't want to. We can't even let certain characters cross over with classic designs. Mighty is not allowed to have a modern interpretation. It's just stupid. It's ridiculous. They keep showing us different dimensions or Shatterverse, all this potential multiversal crap we're so sick of when it comes to the MCU that they absolutely could get away with on occasion with the Hedgehog. Like I said, I don't need them to go wild all the time. I do appreciate appreciate the point of things being canon, and it is cool to see that the comic series is treated as canon to the main game series. Fans can finally get a consistent story to follow in between game releases. That is genuinely awesome, but it does come at a price. Sega is far more strict when it comes to comic stories than it ever was in the past. And yes, I know that lack of oversight in the past led to some really wild, really bad stories and a lot of drama with lawsuits. And other stories just did not line up with what a lot of us perceive to be Sonic. Trust me, I complained about that all the time when I was a kid. But at the same time, this does limit just how many stories you can tell with these characters. So you find yourself with the other extreme, where things can feel safe, bland, and boring really quickly. And I gotta be real, the more time passes and the more I wait for individual stories on a monthly basis, I'm starting to feel that lull with IDW Sonic. Yes, it's cool to see some character interactions we don't usually get to see, but there's only so many times they can do that. And while I am a bitter old fan, I don't think that's out of line to say the same for kids. I do think that will eventually get boring for them as well. While I am very impressed with how well these writers flow together, I'm not seeing much that really stands out from anybody else. And when things are as streamlined as they are, I have to ask myself, why even bother having more than one writer? Why bother bringing someone like Nigel back on board? And that reminds me, yes, I am picking on Sega specifically because we do have some confirmation that they're doing a bit too much meddling thanks to Richard Elson's cover art. I pointed it out on Twitter. It was nice to see his art again, but it still felt a bit off. And as it turns out, Sega of Japan rejected his original cover because it didn't fit with their current design standards. But hey, to give them credit, it sounds like they were at least willing to negotiate, as Elson only redid Tails and not the entire cover. But it is still something I hear all the time when it comes to Sega of Japan. They are obsessed with keeping things on model, which, again, I do understand. This is a corporate mascot and they've got a brand to protect, but Sonic's core design is custom made for creative fluidity. And even failing bringing us back a whole bunch of callbacks from other versions of Sonic comics, I do think I might have preferred a collection of short stories that allowed a lot of these writers and artists to really just go wild. That would have been fun. But speaking of comic representation, I do have to wonder if there was any other opportunity to expand on Archie's history. Don't get me wrong, having Ian Flynn and Evan Stanley alone is pretty amazing. There's a reason why everyone freaked out when we learned that they would be continuing on with the Hedgehog after Archie and Sega split ways. They were amazing back then and they are still amazing. But it might have been fun to bring in some of the other creators to see some more of that old school weird Sonic. I do have to wonder if they reached out to Patrick Spaziante to do one of the alternate covers. That would have been fun. Again, I am nitpicking a thing I didn't even expect would ever exist. IDW even being allowed to acknowledge that other Sonic comics ever existed is already exceeding my expectations of Sega. That number is the closest the writers and artists can get to saying everything is canon. Maybe I'm a bit out of line here, maybe I'm whining when I should just be thankful, but that 900 is more than just a number. It's a culmination of a long history of creators, stories, worlds, characters, and fan bases that all deserve celebration. I'm thankful we are here. I'm thankful for this ridiculous level of talent and creativity on display, and I understand that this book must always, no matter what number it reaches, remain accessible to new readers. And yes, of course, stay true to the brand it's representing. But hey, it'd also be great if those other 899 stories were made available to fans old and new to explore, because Sonic did not get to that 900 by remaining the exact same thing for all of these years. But that tangent aside, make no mistake, the story is light and fun, the characters are charming, I was smiling the whole way through, still had a great time with this tale and picking out Easter eggs, marveling at the stunning art, and like I keep saying, we have the strongest creative team ever in the long history of Sonic comics. Think of it like this: if this was like a work-related party, the company just gave us a very limited budget to work with. But the party planners are really good and they got the very best supplies they could get with the limited budget that they had. So while it's not as lavish as it could potentially be and a lot of the special guests couldn't attend, it was still a great party worth celebrating, and you gotta be thankful for the party planners for putting it together at all, because the company sure as hell wouldn't have done that without their initiative. Do do not let my whining keep you from picking this up and enjoying it yourself. That 900 still means a lot on its own. That is still IDW subtly saying everything leading up to this point matters. It still represents the amazing talent that grew up loving those old stories and coming into their own as creators. And it shows us that all of this time later, Sonic is still a brand worth paying attention to, especially the comic side of things, because that's a huge deal. This is a wonderful milestone worth celebrating, and I hope Sega lightens up a bit so these creators can really pop off by the time Adventure 1000 rolls around. But that is going to do it for today, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and we will be back very soon. And of course, a huge thank you to the patrons who support the channel, including Kyle Winter, Cirrus the Skeptic, Joseph Duncan Sonic 2 Blue, John, Josh Strider, Hatsworth, Tiny Jericho, Ginger Bob, Jack of All Spades, Tristan Trapp, Meekers, Dun Dun, Quote, Resident Fanboy. Macy, I'm still not seeing your name on here, man. You gotta figure out what happened here. Anyway, Miles the Prower, Jeremy Singer, Mr. Boo J, Sam Webster, Fishflop, Lucas Lipker, The Bad Pal, Jonathan Dobbs, Haley, Chad. Is Sonic Team making you blue? Dimps leaving you dumped? Big Red Button, giving you a big red headache? Try Sonic the Chronic. Cecil the Glade, The Dark Neon, Stefan Plakanica, 3 Monic, Graham J. Hall, Lenny X, Wayne is Boss, Letteric, Graham J. Hall, Wayne is Boss, Letteric, Graham J. Hall, Wayne is Boss, Letteric, Graham J. Hall, 20 covers, David, 20 covers, hi Nick. Oh, God. Thank you, David, I think you gave me a stroke. Jimmy Duke STR, The Lumberjack, Trash Baphomet, Autumn from Twitter.com. Make sure you're saying this out loud really excitedly. I'll be sure to get that done properly next time, Autumn, thank you. And don't you mean X.com? That Pyromane needs a funny name, please help. Jin Seotame, Bowden, I'm not reading that. Enerjack 5, I really gotta do a video on Enerjack. I don't care what you guys say about Ken Penders, that was a really cool villain he made. Grayson Conager, Spades the Nocturne, Ken K from Warheads, Then 101, Paxton Bisbee, Sindarin 7, you are a bastard man for not mentioning Fields last episode. You insulted my entire family. You better start running. I did mention Fields. I did. You shut your mouth. I absolutely did. I screamed about it. I squealed. I was just making too much noise. I'll make a whole episode on Fields. I'm planning on doing it. God, there's so much to say when Superstars comes out. I'm going to be losing my mind all next month. Give me a break. I don't want to run. Twilord. The previous person is selling pictures of their weenus. Paisley, Eric Delgado, Kodinsky, Sayonara Robocop, Crimson Rose, Nyx the Kobold, Sonic P.A.J. Moonicent, Roxas the Cat, Godzilla, Bakuda of Salt. Fatal and severe stomach pain is often bad. I mean, yeah, if it's fatal... Yes, if it's fatal, it's very obviously bad. Like, that's dead. Fatal means dead. Alexander Watson, Neil Gompa, Conan Kudo, Sharif Pai, the Lex, the most powerful ship in the 2 universes. I don't understand why you put the space in the way you do, Lex, but go off. You go wild. Native Nerd 27, Kaido Prower, Swift Cannon, Spearmint, Omega Man 21, Penn Adelaide, Other Envelope, Jamie Torres Jr., The Phantomist, Silver Stars S. Did I say Silver? I think I'm so tired. Silver Stars, Daza S, the world's most unironic 8.5 Tails Stan, One More Sonic Robot. Side effects may include anti-sequelitis, impending lawsuit disorder, and self-induced ear trauma. Oh god. Man, that's a lot of lovely names to read. Thank you so much. And I gotta get to work on the next batch of videos. I'm sorry for the delay. You know how it goes, life and all that, but we're gonna get a lot of stuff done. We got a lot of things worth celebrating this fall. So until next time, toot toot Sonic Warriors.